my name is Beatrice Askaner, and as just explained, I work with marketing at Adyen. So, show of hands, how many of you do know Adyen? Oh, wow, that's really good. Good on us. So, whether you know a lot about Adyen and just a little bit, we are essentially a tech company redefining payments. And I, as many people at Adyen, didn't exactly grow up wanting to work in payments, but we kind of came across a really cool company that were willing to do it differently. So essentially what we do is we make accepting payments really easy in all channels globally, enhancing customer experience and creating transparency into transactions. So while we're doing that, we get to work with really cool brands. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and why a transaction can be the moment of truth and how a lot of things that people do in this room is really leading up to that. Essentially, you see all the sort of the covers of future of retail. Having a vision of the future or an idea of what would be the coolest things to do for your brand isn't a problem. The problem is really about what can you do today or where do you need to start, right? So I usually recommend to start with the end. So I call the transaction a moment of truth. The reason why I did that is that if we create really engaging branding, we make beautiful illustrations and we found exactly that right sound for the payments, none of it really matters if the payment experience itself isn't worthwhile, right? So I'm going to give a little bit of example. Imagine this is your advertising. You spent a lot of time doing it. Everything is beautiful. The product is beautiful. Everything is there, and people are thinking, yes, I want to buy this. And then imagine this is your store, your payment page, right? This is quite an extreme example. But what we see a lot is that marketing and branding and advertising, they hardly talk to IT professionals and store professionals that can really make sure that this looks as beautiful as everything else you're working on. So, I'm going to share a few advices on how you can start working on the customer experience of the future already today and give you some examples of brands that I think are doing this really well. So, advice number one, don't innovate in isolation. Innovation is great. Technology does weird and wonderful things. It only does so if it really adds to your customer experience and who you're trying to communicate to. So, take a retail robot, for example. Does it work? Maybe. It depends a little bit on who your target group is. If you're a luxury brand, you probably want to have a person who's really guiding them through the experience instead of having a robot showing them around. So it's based on customer insight and not necessarily on innovation. So a brand that I think does that really, really well, thinking of it from branding to content and to their store inception, is Nike. If you know Nike's mission statement is inspire and innovate for athletes all over the world. And if you have a body, you're an athlete. So essentially, if you've ever been to the Nike House of Innovation in New York, they inspire by enabling you to try out the products in a natural setting. So for example, you might want to try out your new basketball shoes at an in-store basketball court. Or the fact that you, through the app, if you're a loyal customer, you can just check out and pay. You don't have to stand in line. And of course, you have the athletes, experts that are walking around telling you all the nice things that you can buy. And you can just check out with them with a mobile payment device, right? So it really rings true to their experience in who they are, and they want to inspire and innovate, right? Whether you're in their stores or you're looking at their advertising. So, pilots. Your current infrastructure is your future. So we have an Adyen formula that we work towards. So one of the formula points is launch fast and iterate. The idea with that is that you don't have to build up a 20-year plan before you get to innovate. You can also have a look at what you have today, your current tech staff, your current personnel, and start from there, and also re-innovate what you have sometimes. So a good example of that is actually a Dutch one, the Bijenkorf. So a few years ago, they actually closed a few stores. They didn't do so because these stores were financially not viable, or they were sort of on the edge of bankruptcy. They did that to refocus on what their brand purpose was in the first place. So they had a look at like, how can we make our online experience better, and how can we make some of the stores we have, not all of them, the ones that we have make more sense and have a better experience. So by going back to core of what your brand is, you don't have to start from scratch. If you're a new brand starting today, sure, you can build a technology experience from the get-go. But if you've been around for years, or even hundreds of years, sometimes if you're a legacy brand, you can start with what you have and make that really amazing. So align and restructure for success. So I want to go back to what I said in the beginning, that I find that a lot of brand and marketing professionals are not actually talking to the people that can help them create even better experience, whether it's online or in-store. And also what we see a lot is that e-commerce teams are sometimes hardly ever talking to people who are managing stores, for example, when there's a multiple channel setup. So one brand that's done this really well is Lush. Lush was really founded on the idea of having a ethical and sustainable brand already back in, I believe, the 70s or 80s when they were founded. They've been around for quite a long time. So they actually have a tech department that's working really close to the branding department to see how they can bring sort of this brand promise to life. So one of the things that they most recently launched was the Naked app, as they call it, which is essentially an app which allows you to scan through AI products in the store, and then you can see all the ingredients, you can see if it's available in another store, in another, how do you say it, another smell. And they're doing that so that they can avoid packaging. So they're trying to have package-free stores, and they're doing so by implementing innovation. And this is where their marketing teams and their tech teams are working really closely together to make sure that they can constantly innovate. We're all, I think, especially the marketing professionals probably in the room, know that data can be our best friends in terms of analyzing whether or not our work is working. Are we delivering ROI? Are we really connecting with our group? And should we rethink what we're doing? But it can also be a really good way of connecting with your customers, of course. And that's where we see that analyzing the shopping behavior of your customer, it can be one of the best things you can do. Because if you look at what they actually purchase, you want them to be a returning customer, right? Because that's when you can create a lifetime relationship with them. And what better way of doing that is not throwing loyalty programs at them for the sake of it, and they have to carry like stamp cards and plastic cards from 10 different brands, but it's actually to look at their actual purchase behavior. So the brand that's doing this really well is the Danish juice and coffee chain Joan the Juice. They are essentially creating loyalty programs based on the purchase behavior of their customers. So what that means is essentially they can look at if a person is often buying a certain juice, how often they're purchasing, are they heavy juice buyers or rather a coffee drinker, and they build their loyalty programs on that. And it's linked to their payments. So instead of them having to carry around a plastic card or collect a stamp for every juice they're doing, it can be really personalized to them and their card. And of course, that's completely safe and encrypted, but it allows them to give a really good, engaging experience to really loyal customers that they have. So, finally, listen to your customers. I think a lot of these come back to it, and it means that innovation is great. You can apply data to almost everything and make it better, and your tech team and marketing team can connect. But whatever those customer experiences are that you can create, it really depends, again, back to your brand core, what makes sense for you. So to illustrate this, Deliveroo recently started opening restaurants. This is a restaurant that they opened in Singapore. Deliveroo is, of course, fast delivery. They were one of those early brands that was able to bring you nice food from a nice restaurant to your house. It's about convenience and speed, but it's also about good food. So when they started opening their restaurants in Singapore, they wanted to have that same feeling of like instant gratification that you get from home delivery. So they created a fully automated store where you order ahead, and you can pick it up, and you could choose to eat it there or bring it back for lunch at the office. Or you can, of course, order to the office, of course. So I think most people choose to eat in, or a restaurant might be closer to them. A completely other experience is Amara is actually a big Brazilian retailer. And they had another insight about what works for their brand. They were one of the biggest e-commerce players in Brazil, very successfully so. But what they found over and over again is that people actually want to try out clothes, they want to touch materials, and sometimes they want to get style tips. So what they started doing instead is actually breaking into the physical space. So they started opening up guide shops, which allowed their customers to go in, try material, get a bit of advice on their style, but they're actually not bringing any goods with them because they still want to stay an e-commerce business at the core. So what they do is you complete your transaction in the guide shop, and then it gets sent home to you the same day. So their insight was very much about people wanting convenience of an online e-commerce business, but they want to have a physical experience as well and connect with the brand. So that is what's right for them. So what's right for Deliveroo wasn't right for Amano, and it might not be good for your brand. So listen to your customers and think about actually what is the experience they want, how do you apply technology to that, and how do you connect what you want to say in your branding all the way through to the moment of truth, the transaction. And that was it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beatrice. I'm just curious, because the better your technology works, the easier it is to buy stuff. Do you educate your customers on like the ethical implications?
The ethical implications.
Well, for example, the fact that if a customer of yours, for example, it's way easier to buy stuff than it used to be, then I'll buy more stuff, but maybe I need some protection. Do you do something with that?
We don't do so much with that because we offer all sorts of payments, some of them where you very actively have to confirm your payment, such as most of the banking apps, to credit card, where it's maybe more easier. The European Union are doing a lot with strong customer authentication, that you have to confirm a payment at least 2 times before you actually buy something, to protect consumers from being too trigger happy.
Okay.
So we don't necessarily influence legislation or try to affect it in any way, but that is the trend in the European Union.
Well, good to hear. A question from Lotte. Working on all these different kinds of users and branches, what challenges do you face in building the Adyen brand in Europe?
I think in terms of building the Adyen brand in Europe is, first of all, we're of course a B2B brand, so we have a niche target group. I think it's hard, the hardest thing in our space is that it's very easy to claim technology and uniqueness. It's a different way what's happening behind the scenes. So I think with B2B marketeers in fintech, we struggle a lot with the sea of sameness. Adyen, for example, is the only payment technology company out there that has one single platform. But I think that's something that most of our competitors claim. They work with many platforms, but they sort of patch it together under one brand. But we can all put one platform, easy payments, great technology in our marketing, but it's hard to stand out by doing that. And I think it's hard to remain unique when people don't get a feeling for your technology up front.
Any brands you look for as inspiration?
I have a bit of a weird one that I really admire. I really like General Electronics and General Electrics. General Electrics, I think, is really funny as a B2B brand because they do weird things like wind turbines and hospital equipment and things like that. But they do really engaging marketing.
Can you give an example?
I think one of the ones they did a few years ago that I really like was they said my mom or my dad works for General Electrics, and they had kids trying to explain what their parents do. And mind you that their parents are engineers and do really abstract things that is hard to explain to a kid. And then they had an illustrator illustrate what the kid was telling, which was, of course, very absurd. And it was really beautiful because it went down to talking about that their parents are essentially saving the world in the eyes of a kid, which I think was a fun way of explaining what they do.
I'm curious how a kid would explain a payment service, but thank you very much, Beatrice.
Thank you. Thanks.